Hi there, I'm Mark Teacher, and welcome to another weekend worksheet. We're still talking about IELTS Speaking Part 2, and today we're describing experiences. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can use the past perfect to describe the very first time you tried something. This is useful if you have a question about a new activity, a new sport, or a new experience you had never experienced before. Here's an example which doesn't use the past perfect. Describe an interesting journey you went on. An interesting journey I went on was when I drove from Nairobi to Mombasa last year. We started our journey at 3 a.m. Actually, it's not very far from Nairobi to Mombasa, but the reason we left so early was because of the traffic. Before we started driving, we loaded the car with a lot of stuff, like a surfing board, some snorkels and clothes. That was the first time I saw Nairobi city so early in the morning. When we arrived at the deserted beach in Mombasa, the sun was starting to rise. I was amazed by how beautiful the view was. I've highlighted one sentence. That was the first time I saw Nairobi city so early in the morning. That sentence is correct. It's perfectly fine. But I think we can improve it. We can improve our grammar score by using a less common and slightly more advanced grammar tense, which is the past perfect. So instead of the first time, we can use the past perfect. The past perfect means at that time in the past. Sometimes I describe it as the past of the past. So instead of that was the first time, I could say I had never seen Nairobi so early in the morning. At that time, in the past, before then, I had never seen the city that early. We often use never in this construction when it's the first time. I had never studied English with a native speaker before. We had never seen them live in concert before. They had never met such a huge celebrity before. In this sentence, huge means famous. If you are big, a big celebrity, you are very famous. So a huge celebrity. If you remember our strong adjective video from a few weeks ago, you'll know that's a very, very big and very, very famous celebrity. So you can practice including these in your own IELTS Part 2 answers. Let's practice converting these. So I'm going to give you a sentence such as, it was my first time seeing dolphins in the wild. I want you to convert it into the past perfect, like, I had never seen dolphins in the wild before. So seeing becomes the past participle, the third form, see, saw, seen, and we use I had never, because before this moment in the past, I had never seen it. Number 2 is, that was the first time I ate real Thai food. That becomes, I had never eaten real Thai food before. When I'm telling my story, back then, 5 years ago, I went to Thailand. Before I went to Thailand, I had never eaten real Thai food in a real Thai street market before. So it was a new experience for me. 3, that was the first time I took a flight longer than 10 hours. Maybe I was flying from London to Mexico, a long journey, and before I took that journey, that I had never taken a flight longer than 10 hours before. Number 4. It was my first time staying in a 5-star hotel. Before this trip, before I went to the Maldives, I had never stayed in a 5-star hotel before. But that was my first time. Let's practice a few more. That was the first iPhone I ever bought. So before I bought this product, before I upgraded to a new smartphone, I had never bought an iPhone before. Often in speaking, we contract I and had. I'd never bought. I'd never bought an iPhone before. Number 6. It was my first time speaking English to a native speaker. Maybe before I visited London, I had never spoken English to a native speaker before. That was the first time. 7. That was the first time I rode a motorbike. Maybe before I went to the Philippines and rented one, I had never ridden, that's ridden a motorbike before. One more. That was the first time I cooked a fancy meal at home. Maybe before I bought that new recipe book, or before I received a cookbook as a gift, I had never cooked a fancy meal at home before. So there you are. That's a way to introduce a complex and a tricky grammar tense into your IELTS Part 2 speaking. You can use this when you're describing the first time you ever did something in the past. If you want to practice this grammar with more activities, more exercises and more examples, you can find them in my Part 2 worksheets available in my store. I also have Part 1 worksheets, which you can find in previous weekend worksheet videos as well. If you have any questions about the past perfect, about the grammar, about the IELTS, send me a message. I'll reply as soon as I see it. And I will see you next weekend. Goodbye.